In case you're wondering, I'm not Georgi Chukovic. I'm Hemant Sampath. I'm a VP of Engineering at Qualcomm Research. And I work at taking 5G to new use cases and devices, more specifically at the intersection of wireless XR cloud gaming. Right, so it is my pleasure to welcome you to an exciting session. We just concluded a session on future of wireless, and now we're going to go into exciting new use cases such as XR and cloud gaming. So welcome to this session, and then as you all know, XR, the use cases are now becoming mainstream, whether it is the Apple Vision Pro mixed reality headset or the Meta Quest 3. Or now you have the very popular Ray-Ban AR or like smart glasses from Meta. And then also glasses, AR glasses, such as the Lenovo A3 glasses, which could be plugged into your 5G capable smartphone, and you could have augmented reality experiences, right? And also the use cases are also proliferating, whether it is enterprise use cases or consumer use cases, including navigation, fitness, gaming, and so on.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending this. We're really excited to have a great panel session. We've got a diverse group of panelists here, and maybe rather than me introducing them, maybe each one of you can introduce yourselves. So starting with John Ross.
Sure. Is this on? Testing? Okay, great. So my name is J.R. Rizzo. I'm a physician scientist at NYU Grossman School of Medicine, also NYU Tandon School of Engineering. I also would like to offer an inclusive description. So I am a legally blind white male with a receding hairline and a sharp 5 o'clock shadow at, I guess, about 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I'm wearing a pink shirt, a blue blazer, and for those who can only see the top of me, I promise I'm wearing pants. They're dark gray. And I'll pass it on.
Hey guys, Vishal Shah. I'm the general manager of XR and spatial computing at Lenovo. Been in the XR AI space for almost 10 years now, and thank you, Sujit, for putting this together. It's great that we have this great event in the community of San Diego, and thank you for bringing the best of talent here. Appreciate it, and thanks, Sahil, for hosting.
Hi, everybody. I'm Terry Schusler. I work for Deutsche Telekom as the senior director of XR and spatial computing. I've been a software developer for 50 years, and I've been working through the winters of AI and VR in the 80s and 90s, and now I'm back at it again with the last 7 or 8 years focusing on XR and AI technologies.
Thank you, George. To quick here, Hemant already introduced me. I'm head of wireless at Meta Reality Labs. Been with Meta for the last 10 years, different roles across the devices and infrastructure. Before that, mainly career in the silicon, wireless silicon at Broadcom and BC.
Great. So we've got several different areas of questions. So we'll kind of go and assign different folks to focus in each area. So starting kind of top down, overall trends. Then we'll go into some questions around wireless in XR, distributed compute, which Georgie touched on a little bit as well. AI, and then kind of the trade-offs between practical applications and cutting-edge technology. So, if you don't like any of the questions, you can blame these Ray-Ban wearable glasses, because some of these questions actually were generated by them. No, I'm just kidding. So, starting out, kind of general market trends. Vishal, maybe you can go first on this. What do you see as the barriers to massive scale adoption in XR over the next 2 to 5 years? And, what are the things that the industry can do to overcome those barriers?
Yeah, I mean, just taking a step back, I think over the last 6 to 12 months, we've come a long way in terms of the acceptability of these devices and the content ecosystem around it, right? I think the key components of the XR ecosystem are around, obviously, the hardware that we talk about quite a bit. But the other big element is the software ecosystem, the solution ecosystem that's going to add value to these devices, right? Without that, it's just a brick that sits in your drawer somewhere. And then the third one is sort of the partner ecosystem sort of soup to nuts from the cloud to pocket that you need, that Georgie talked about to a certain extent, right? It's not only the device, it's the cloud players, it's the edge technologies, it's the cloud XR kind of split rendering technologies that are going to offload a lot of this content from the device to the cloud and to edge devices. That makes it more palatable. So as we look forward over the next 2 to 5 years, we're super excited about some of the hardware trends, around pass-through, around some of the sensors, around connectivity that's going to get better and better. That's going to make these devices more palatable and more compact. The second area is around the solutions that we're seeing, the ecosystem partners, and to a certain extent, Qualcomm's doing a great job with their Spaces OpenXR ecosystem, where we're seeing a lot of this content becoming democratized, and especially with generative AI now, content that used to take 2 years to develop can now be developed in 2 months. What used to take, teams in Hollywood that were very high-paid folks, you can now do that at a much lower price point, right? So that content is being increasingly democratized, which is very exciting. And now we're seeing the actual use of 5G technologies coming in very fast. Because I strongly believe that XR are the eyes and ears of AI. AI is going to generate a lot of data, but how do you view it in a more palatable way? And I strongly feel that XR is the way to do that going forward. And we're already seeing that with some of the technologies that we're working on.
Cool. Hey, Terry, just kind of building on that question and maybe getting a little bit more specific, how do you see the trends around, volume and volume growth, split between AR, like these glasses and more immersive glasses, as well as, more traditional VR, MR devices?
Yeah. So, currently I think the split's roughly 15-1 VR to AR headsets, somewhere around total 35 million units. So it's still a small number. You have to consider there's still a huge opportunity for growth in the space. Only, a fraction of a percent of people on this planet have even seen a VR headset, let alone tried it out and gotten the experience of it. So there's a lot of room for us to still communicate the value of it. I think we've seen some mixing based on the technology, and especially pass through on VR. So we see this transition of devices that were purely centric to VR, virtual world only experiences, versus AR only, kind of hybridized. And so the concept of XR, sort of a device that can do both, is I think going to continue to have a very strong growth in the marketplace. But I do think that purpose-built AR glasses are also showing some strong growth. One vendor realized tremendous growth just off of the value of extending the display experience in a convenient way with a Steam Deck device. Mm-hmm. So, being able to have this sort of virtual screen anywhere experience is something you can go back to, like the Virtual Boy, but it is, it's something that people find of high value because it's something you can use in a ubiquitous manner for gaming. They can use it for, viewing content. Entertainment content viewing is one of the most high trafficked areas in immersive devices. Like 94% of the people that use a device that's a head-worn device typically will watch entertainment content as like a dominant use case. So I think I don't think you'll see devices that are targeted specifically to verticals like shopping, but certainly like in the AEC automotive industry, you see devices that target that very specifically on the very high end, where visualization quality is absolutely paramount to selling a product that costs hundreds of millions of dollars, or visualizing the construction of a multi-billion-dollar complex. So I think that will continue to have a market, but what we're really going to see is a lot more focus on consumer and bringing the price point down to consumer price points. And I think the Meta Ray-Ban Stories device is a good example of where AI becomes a forcing function within that space, but it has no display. It's not really an augmented reality device yet. So there's still a lot of room for opportunity in that context. AI wearables in general, I've got a couple here, Humane Pin, Rabbit. These devices aren't really AR devices, but they're showing the value of ubiquitous access to AI. And I think when you bring that up on AR glasses, that's going to drive a lot of consumer growth in the space.
Yeah, like the always-on assistant that's with you everywhere.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So I think just adding to that as well, Vishal, what are your views on purpose-built versus generic devices, and maybe between enterprise and consumer? Do you think there's a there's a place for that, or do you think it's still going to be, more generic?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a fork in the industry around consumer enterprise, right? I mean, that's a no-brainer. The enterprise devices have to be a lot different than the consumer devices because there's more room for those devices to be slightly higher end. The graphics have to be better. The ecosystem is very different. The people working on it require certain different, slightly very high standards of security, privacy. Being able to make sure that you can actually deploy these devices across an enterprise ecosystem, working with the IT and operations parts of your team. So those devices have to be designed in some ways bottom up to support the enterprises. On the consumer side, obviously we're seeing we've seen limited success with pure augmented reality glasses, what Terry talked about, glasses with displays, with 6DoF, 3D capability. And I think as the technology improves, as some of the split rendering and being able to connect it to 5G devices improves, I think we're going to see, a lot of a force function there as well. Now, will there be multiple devices on the consumer side? I think there is room once the TAM is there, once we see that kind of demand. I mean, if you look at the smartphone industry, they sell more smartphones than they sell toothbrushes and toothpaste in the world, right? But we do not see that many different form factors. There are no really purpose-built smartphones. So the jury is still out there. Will there be an all-in-one device with different sensors, different controllers to help you with fitness, etc., or will it be, will there be 10 devices across different verticals? TBD.
Okay,
I feel.
Yep. So, Georgie, just pivoting a little bit, what do you think are the highest priority obstacles to accelerate growth in XR, and maybe across MR and AR?
Yeah. So if you look at the AR, there's still, we talk about AR as a real see-through when you project video on the actual glass, right? And while it superimposes with the real reality, if you will, there's still some challenges from a display, making displays cost-effective. So from AR perspective, right? That's probably long pole in the process. Other things like making AR glasses socially acceptable from the how they look and how comfortable they are. They cannot be chunky or awkward. They have to be like blending into your day regular use, what people expect. Of course, Meta Ray-Ban enabled that, but if you add more processing and make it really a computing device, then there are a lot of challenges actually with integration, enabling something like that. So on the AR side, I would say these are the main things. On the VR, I think VR is largely going in the right direction. There's still more content to be created. I think content is pretty sparse. Again, all evolves still around gaming. We also excited about some of these new entertainment use cases, 3D video event streaming. Like let's say you transport yourself to the concert on the other side of the world with a 3D camera at the event, and you basically can be there with your friends for split of a cost. But there's still more content to be generated. In terms of purpose devices, the way we're approaching so far is that we still have the general purpose device for multiple use cases, and we partner with different OEMs on the specific accessories that pair with our devices and enable some specific use cases. But then we also recently opened up the Horizon OS that we want to actually enable a larger ecosystem on device side, right? So we'll have our own devices, but we recognize that we need a larger ecosystem on device side as well. So these are some of the challenges, right, to come to a larger scale we see.
Got it. Yeah, and maybe talking a little bit about challenges more specifically around wireless connectivity, John Ross. What do you see are the challenges and solutions for getting seamless connectivity across the various different categories of XR devices, and between an XR device and a wearable device that that many of us now have on our hands, et cetera?
Sure. Good question. Yeah, I think there are a couple of different themes, and obviously being the physician interloper here, I'll be a bit biased, talking about use cases as it relates to both lifestyle and also healthcare specifically. And I think at a higher level, sort of a meta view, pun intended, we look at this both in terms of all of the extended reality platforms as both training and education opportunities, but also as diagnostic, prognostic, and therapeutic opportunities. So we're using XR in different ways, directly integrated with some of our assistive technologies. And then within that space, things that keep us up at night as it relates to the quality of service and thinking about wireless connectivity is really jumping in and trying to blend multiple agents into some of those constructs, right? So some of the dyads that we typically work with are clinician and patient, for example, or I do a lot of blind science, right? So blindness and visual impairment science. And so we think a lot about teachers of the visually impaired, or TVIs, or orientation and mobility instructors, working directly with patients in VR experiences, and then really nailing down some of those dynamics. How do we try to strive to nail down those interpersonal communications, but also making it more lifelike, so they really think, that they're truly immersed in learning. And if we can set up the right lifelike experience when they're going to, a new university setting, can they really apply those skills? I think that's, really critical. Another thing that I think is really important is what we like to call multiplexing microservices. So for someone who's visually impaired and blind, if we think about function, and we're always sort of obsessed with function, we're constantly thinking about multiple demands, right? Aside from just cognitive load. So for example, if I'm, a visually impaired end user, and I'm trying to trade in that particular context, I might have sort of micro, meso, and macro navigation needs. But then as I sort of refine for the last few meters, I really need short text awareness with OCR and thinking about sign recognition. And then I also have travel concerns as it relates to obstacle negotiation. So with some of the microservices we've tried to embed in some of these XR platforms, we've tried to multiplex those microservices. And I think it's been really interesting to try and support those again in meaningful ways, so they then translate into reality. Maybe I'll leave it there.
Okay. Yeah. So going back a little bit on wireless comm protocols, Georgie, what are the techniques that you think the industry could be working on related to lowering latency, maximizing bandwidth specific to XR applications, and maybe again between MR and AR?
Right. I think there's a lot of opportunity on the networking side. How when you start talking about AI and off the offloads, if we want to get the complexity out of the devices into the network, there's a lot of opportunities there to optimize the network together with device applications. I mentioned that network-aware application and application-aware networks, there's a lot of information that can flow through. Building your transport layer with the knowledge of what is being transported, right? If you're transmitting video frames versus audio frames, there's different ways you can optimize your transport layer. There's a lot of new technologies that offer really nice improvements in jitter and latency. It's not just latency, but it's all the P95. L4S is I'm really happy that it's finding its way in both cellular and Wi-Fi networks. It's almost like competition between it's going to be first line on fixed or a cellular. But I think will benefit all of these applications. More bandwidth, of course, is better, just because things get faster through the network. So I think all of these things coming with 5G and newer generation of Wi-Fi will enable in-device connectivity in the constellation, but also connection back to the network.
Yeah. So, go ahead.
And just to add to that, if you look at the device ecosystem, especially on the enterprise side, just like you have the Copilot for AI PCs going forward, you're going to have a Copilot sitting on each and every XR device with applications that make you an expert or train you on the job, right? Or serve the right kind of content to you at the right time using generative AI. So these Copilots are going to be either running with some very small token load on the device itself, which is ideal, but you can't always rely on that. But at some point, you're going to have to offload it to a edge device, right? If it's a small puck that's sitting there, if it's a network edge AI. So that connectivity becomes extremely important for these application ecosystem to grow and for that generative AI to really have a huge impact and to be able to use these devices for a long period of time as well.
Yeah. So like on the bands and the different types of technologies, what do you think is most well suited again between MR and AR, Georgie?
Well, it's kind of interesting. People think about AR as a mobile device because you're out there, you're not at home, and so it is very easy to fall in trap. Hey, that requires more spectrum on the mobile side. But then all of the AR devices are multi-part devices. There's always constellation, and that on-body communication and proximity. Sometimes Bluetooth is not good enough for, right? And therefore, having Wi-Fi is very important for us. So having basically 6 gigahertz I-license spectrum provides a lot of value. Now, if you think about it, it's not so much about data rate, but it's just the whole paradigm and how they actually save power. A lot of ways we do it is just basically open up the channel, quickly transmit something and shut down. And being able to actually have that opportunity to shut down the hardware or radio, which is the biggest consumer, is very important. And then also from interference perspective, you occupy less spectrum. It's much more amicable. So unlicensed spectrum is still very important for us, but we also see the need enabling more spectrum on the cellular side, because after all devices will need to continue to be mobile. So finding that right balance, it's not clear to me. Maybe it's an information theory problem. Maybe academic can help us. What is the right amount of spectrum we need between licensed and unlicensed, with a upper bound on all the communications that we ever do. This will kind of guide us in the right split. I still don't know where that is lands.
Got it. Yeah. So going a little bit more into distributed compute, John Ross, what do you see as the role of edge computing and edge computing versus local computing for XR applications, and how do you balance that computational load between that remote server and what you're doing on device?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now it has to be a reality of how we're moving forward. Just thinking about the context and the prior answer to that question about multiplexing microservices, I think it's really important in most of these platforms. When we think about blind science, we're talking about a lot of MR headsets, a lot of AR glasses. We don't use this sort of constellation of devices terminology, but I like it. We often talk about an anchor device that someone really prefers to use as a must-have instead of a nice-to-have, with a bunch of additional peripherals, but sort of same intended meaning. And a lot of times, if we really think about that distributed computing, we like to think of things in a functional context, right? So we like to have basic needs that are really essential, and then some of these advanced features that may be really nice to think about operational efficiency for whatever you're doing. I mean, you could be someone with a disability at the airport who's trying to pick up a snack or trying to negotiate a complex gate. On my way here, for example, of course, I was at the end part of the terminal. I had to go downstairs and upstairs and downstairs again, given some, renovation. There's always something happening. So, I think it's really important to contextualize what's needed and then to see if you can work with the end user to channel their sort of voice, and thinking about, in this situation, I'm going to, from even a network prioritization standpoint, this is going to be most important. This is critical given, my specific functional needs and current capacity. And so I'm going to distribute or really think opportunistically as to how I'm sort of defining or dividing up those computational needs.
Okay. Yeah, if I could add a little bit to that, you're talking about the constellation. I've always referred to it as a personal area network of devices. I've got a watch. I've got mobile phones in my pocket. I've got compute on my body. These devices don't talk to each other generally, but when they do, it's a big improvement in the customer experience, right? And so there's a lot, and you get performance benefits and so forth. So having worked in the edge team for 8 years, I can tell you this is an edge device, right? But it doesn't get treated as such, and is a missed opportunity. So I think mesh computing, as it comes to play, to deliver that sort of, what's on my body compute that also then connects to the metro, regional, edge, and backhaul. I think that's going to be a huge game changer. L4S, which I'm very familiar with, is a great example of a technical standard that needs to be leveraged to deliver that, because there's a lot of these good technical standards that just don't get the kind of play that they should. Unity and Unreal developers don't understand networking protocols at the level necessary to tap the optimization of an L4S. But and then the frameworks don't want to invest in abstracting it yet, so they just don't get used.
Yeah. So what do you, Terry? What do you think are the use cases around distributed compute? In enterprise, consumer, et cetera, that would drive the need for distributed compute?
What's going to drive XR in general is going to be visual search, multimodal interaction, and both of those require significantly large models that can't be deployed to device unless I want to sit and just be updating my device constantly every day, which actually already kind of happens. So I think this is going to push a strong value proposition for edge compute, because edge computing was always like a great technical solution looking for a use case. And I think deployment of AI models is a great example of a use case that will benefit everybody when it's deployed through edge. I think those use cases that our passive like entertainment use cases won't benefit quite so much, but I think the lean in ones like immersive shopping, gaming, and education, where visual search is kind of and multimodal interaction is really sort of a gateway to self-education, right? And improving yourself. I can be an expert in anything instantly. And so I think what XR devices do is they give agency to that intelligence. So you can visualize or have an actual character that gives, a sense of customized agency to that intelligence that the user can have a conversational experience with. That's going to be a completely different user experience than typing on my phone. And so I think that as it becomes ubiquitously available through either the OS level or through the application development framework level, like a Unity and an Unreal, or language level, it will really be a big game changer in those use cases.
Yeah, and so you're definitely gonna need to have distributed compute,
Absolutely.
To enable those types of
You
use
can't
cases.
deliver it without it.
Without it.
Yeah.
So like around distributed compute, maybe Georgie and then John Ross, what are the types of novel approaches you think for balancing the computational load, remotely versus locally?
It's a very hard question. I don't think that we are able to answer that yet because a lot of that, my intuition is that there's no single solution to fit all of the use cases. A lot of that will be use case by use case dependent. And in many cases, even for the same use case, it may dynamically change based on network condition, load, state of the device in terms of battery and all that. So we need to, unfortunately, architect in a way it's like a framework that we can move things dynamically. Even from edge perspective, we want to like to have, there will be a lot of cases where you render will depend who you are interacting with, right? Your closest server to you may not be a closest server to somebody on the other side of the world. So how do you move the workload to another side? How do you do dynamically distributed load? And then oftentimes it'll be based on a capacity. The closest edge to you may not be the best one because it might be overloaded. Maybe you don't have compute capacity. Maybe you need to do somewhere else. So I expect that a lot of this will be much more dynamic. So you'll basically, and then a lot of that might be even rendered in your proximity. It may be rendered on your laptop, right? You'll basically look for next node available to offload, and then be able to dynamically find and do that. Smart allocation will be very important. So there's a lot of tools that needs to be built on top of all of this to have intelligence of distribution.
John Ross, did you want to?
Yeah, no, I think well said. I mean, it's complicated and TBD at this point. I guess I'll just make one more plug to say, a lot of times we like to think about this as, fingerprinting need and really sort of prioritizing, the functional problem that we're trying to solve for. And then we can, sort of dictate what comes next. Just one other point I wanted to make, because we talked a little bit about multimodal interaction being so important, and we're talking about this concept of accessibility as well a lot this morning. I just want to plug, a lot of times that word when it's used really has to do with sort of creating access versus accessibility. And I just want to make a plug to really think about multimodal feedback and how important this is as we think about these tools generalizing into all of these sort of lifestyle verticals and also other sort of healthcare verticals.
Yeah, I mean, a great use case example would be sign language conversion.
100%.
Being able to subtitle what somebody's signing and be able to speak and have that re-signed. And,
Yep.
And in fact, a great example of a ubiquitous use case that's going to drive a lot of consumption is going to be translation.
Yep.
Real-time translation.
And just the ability for me to touch a button and translate into 50 languages in real time in a conversation.
Absolutely.
Hello, Star Trek.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's here now, and then but the accessibility on the device is an important point. Yep.
Yeah. So what about the privacy implications of some of these use cases, particularly the ones that are AI driven? How do you see that? Maybe Vishal and Terry.
Yeah, Terry, you want to go first?
Well, I mean, look. Growing up with the EFF and this idea of user privacy and, sort of how important it has become over time, and working for a company that's very centrically focused on data privacy concerns and a country that's very centrally focused on data privacy concerns, I very much think that we have a long way to go there, especially as we're working to deliver, new and improved AI models so fast that we're not really having control over the guardrails put in place the way we need. And there's very little auditability in these platforms. I co-wrote our digital ethics for AI standard in 2017. And made a lot of cases for how there needs to be a sort of good housekeeping seal of approval, third party, sort of consensus board that can be used to review and analyze these things and decide whether or not they have that stamp of community approval. We haven't done that yet. I think there's going to be a lot of cases for that, especially as we go to multi-LLM orchestration approaches, where we're going to be using a Perplexity and an OpenAI and an Anthropic and a whatever, and the user will have no idea what's being used, how, and when. And so it becomes even more problematic when their personal information is being leveraged to give them a good experience. And so that quid pro quo needs to be very clear to everybody, this sort of self-sovereign data and identity standards, where I clearly say these pieces of data are available, but I want to understand exactly how they're going to use and have complete control over, turning the access off or changing it.
Yeah, so just to add to that, to bring a more enterprise perspective, I think, data privacy and security is going to be the biggest impediment to the deployment of generative AI going forward, right? I think it's right now, there's a lot of buzz, there's a lot of hype around it, but when it comes to the enterprises, there's definitely a wait and see approach. There's a walk, crawl, run kind of approach as well. So to me, that's where the enterprise is going to be very conservative with what they do. And a lot of that, the solution to that is to move a lot of that black box and control that black box inside your network itself, right? So more and more now you're seeing shift of the pendulum from a virtual cloud to more of a private cloud, or more at the very least a hybrid cloud, right? So you control the data and it doesn't go to a generic LLM. As we look at the AI PC revolution, a lot of these LLMs are now going to run locally, and they will never push the data into the public cloud at all. It'll all be controlled. The intelligence, the inference, even the training is all going to happen inside the organization itself, right? With these open source models, or a model that you use from a trusted company. So that's going to be a big part of how some of that distribution happens of the AI LLMs going forward. And that's no different on the XR side as well, where you have a co-pilot sitting on your device. So that's going to be a key part of what we do going forward. And when it comes to regulations, I mean, there is zero internet regulations in this country. I have no hopes that there will be any regulation on that side either when it comes to AI. We'll see. There'll be some guardrails, but that's going to be the biggest challenge of our generation, I feel.
Yeah, thanks. I know we only have about 2.5 minutes or so, and we're standing between you and lunch, so maybe we should open it up to some questions.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the panel discussion. I just have a question. So what's your view of the uplink, downlink traffic split for AR, MR? Yeah, thanks.
Maybe take that. That's a great question. Symmetric bandwidth will play bigger and bigger role, because this type of applications will be more bidirectional. So we need to design our networks to be equally good in uplink and downlink.
Yeah, totally agree with that.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So I guess you talked about the privacy consideration. How about the economics? Coming from the business side of it, I mean, I go back to my PhD work. We did talk about quality of experience and quality of service. And are we still going to charge per byte, per minute? Where is the model of the economic model you're seeing on your end to really think about quality of experience, especially since you will have choices of what you're going to use in terms of the interface and models and so on? Maybe
Vishal, do you want to?
Yeah, so I think there are two. I'll put this in two buckets. One is the sort of the wireless aspect of it, right? I mean, there is the high-speed latency data networks that you need, and then the second is the outcome aspect, right? So what we're seeing with a lot of our ISVs and solution providers, when you look at things like multi-user experiences or location-based entertainment, think about a stadium with 50,000 people wearing these AR glasses and being able to visualize the game in 3D, right? Having statistics in 3D. After a touchdown is scored, being able to interact with your friends and replay that same touchdown in different angles. 50,000 people doing it at the same time, right? We already are working with major carriers in the US, Japan, Europe to bring that to life. We've done some POCs, and we're actually even working with the Padres to do that. So that's where the economics kind of really help you monetize XR in some of these environments. We're now talking about theme parks like Disney, where your kids wait for 2 hours on for the ride, you can now have these glasses that will serve up entertainment. It'll talk about the new movie. It'll talk about merchandising. It'll make it easier, right? They won't be crying now in the sun. They have entertainment. So I think it has to start with the outcomes first. What's the ROI of the solutions and outcomes, and then the economics, of course, will. The network economics is always a challenge, but to me, XR, just like autonomous vehicles, is one of the most bandwidth hungry technologies out there because it sits at the intersection of technology and content, right? It's 3D content that has to be rendered real time all the time and at the latency that your brain doesn't get messed up, right? So it's one of the most difficult challenges, and it's ripe for 5G and even moving into 6G, especially with these these huge stadiums that you need to fill in. That's where 6G becomes super interesting as well.
Yeah, I would add that mobile phone monetization models dominate. We've moved society from a buy once, right to own forever to a subscription model. That's going to be pervasive across all types of use case classes and types of technology stacks. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon, but you'll see, as you've seen gyration in terms of entertainment content bundling, with combined bundles with like satellite and cable networks, and then deconstruction of that, and kind of then sort of pseudo bundling again as they acquire each other. I think you'll see some of that happen on the mobile space, and also in the XR space with applications that you subscribe to and continue to have sort of this ubiquitous experience, especially applications that you're going to use a lot. Frequent use, daily use. That's where the real win will be there.
And I know I'm sitting in a community of wireless experts here, but I think network slicing when it comes to 5G, I think it's a absolute diamond in the rough when it comes to being able to serve these high quality latency networks for specific use cases, specific devices, for a concert, for a specific time of the day. I think the evolution you're seeing in network slicing is going to be quite game changing as well. And I think that should be a big focus of the academics and entrepreneurs as well in terms of how you can use that.
Okay. Maybe one last question, and then we'll call it a day.
So we've seen a lot of the XR, VR, AR going for entertainment. What about that for medical? Is that an untapped industry? Should there be like a Quest 3 at every hospital bed to like alleviate the pain of the patients? Is this untapped zone?
I guess I could take that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I think it is largely untapped. I think we're seeing it used more. I could tell you in our NYU ecosystem, there are neurosurgeons playing with headsets. I won't bring up brand names, but there are assistive technologists like myself using different AR glasses and MR headsets. But again, as I mentioned in the beginning, I think a lot of it is to try to figure out the best constructs for training, educational purposes. But there's so much opportunity as it relates to, again, that sort of diagnostic bucket, that prognostic bucket. So for those unfamiliar, that's predicting sort of where you'll be medically in the future, right? And then also as a therapeutic. I think traditionally a lot of these approaches, everyone's jumping and sort of rushing into therapeutics, but we're not really thinking enough about the diagnostic opportunities. Can we get into the prodromal phase, that very sort of early phase from a medical, diagnosis? And let's be honest, probably the most disruptive thing today, if we're talking about anything, is senescence and aging right now. This is a huge, huge problem. And, we really need to get ahead of it. And I think all these tools could definitely be more used and tapped more heavily in medicine and healthcare. But curious to hear the meta thoughts.
Look, we agree. I mean, we build devices and then people make various use cases. And absolutely, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a good example of that would be Trip. And then as we went through the
Right.
COVID pandemic, people had a need to sort of, work to be more mindful, work to address their mental health, and applications like Trip and Calm came to the market and have achieved really good success. And then we even see fitness in some respects being a strong category for VR headsets.
And the clinical data on that is super encouraging when it comes to PTSD, when it comes to rehab, when it comes to mental fitness, and helping with depression. The numbers are astounding. So I think that's one area I think I'm most excited about when it comes to enterprise and B2B is healthcare.
Yeah, I mean, even look at the AR device again, talking about constellation devices, all the sensing, there'll be a lot of area of sensing your health and basically feeding that back to the AI and inferring, prevention and different decisions. So that area is really interesting.
With
how
the clinician
that comes
in the loop,
together.
right?
Yeah.
And think about the use case, right? You've got someone living 40 miles away from the Veterans Administration Hospital. Now you just UPS a device for $10. They use it for 3-4 months. They see positive results and ship it back, right? You're saving on so much logistics, so much, folks involved in the middle. Now you're automating the whole process, and you can track them, monitor them with new technologies and networks, as well as eye tracking and sensors as well.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sahil.
Thank you.
Thanks.